Okay, this is day 2 of Monopoly. We'll make a pretty big dent in Monopoly today, and then on Monday we'll be able to come back and finish up Monopoly. So today we're going to learn a little bit more. All right, so what we learned in here yesterday is we learned all about, well, great, the clicker's not working, okay. We learned all about monopolies, okay, and we learned that this is a monopoly earning a profit here. We know they're earning a profit because the price is above the ATC. We know that firms produce where MR equals MC. That's, they find that magic point, and from that point we then come down and we find our quantities. Okay, once we've got the quantity, we then go up to the price to find out whether or not they're earning a profit. If price is above ATC, then they're earning an economic profit. Okay, so that was a monopoly earning a profit. I went through the numbers and I showed you that, you know, total revenue is price times quantity. So the whole blue square there is total revenue, with the total cost being the red area. So if you take total revenue minus total cost, that gives you your area of profit, and that's that area up there. Okay, so that's what we did yesterday. Now, one thing I do want to point out with this, monopolists, unlike a perfect competitive market, they don't have a supply curve. They have no supply curve. So when you look back at this guy here, that marginal cost curve is not the monopoly's supply curve. A monopoly has a supply point. Okay, and if you think about it, that makes sense, because this monopolist is going to produce where they're going to produce at the quantity down here. This quantity, whoops, they're going to produce at this quantity down here, right there. Well, that's the equivalent of that point on the demand curve. So that is actually where supply is equal to demand. So they have a supply point, not a supply curve. The other thing about monopolists that are interesting is, of course, they have the downward sloping demand curve, and therefore they have that marginal revenue. And since they have to lower the price on that unit and all previous units, you have a marginal revenue curve that falls at a faster rate. Monopolists are not trying to get the highest price. A lot of people say, oh, monopolists are evil because they're going to charge a really high price. Yeah, they are going to charge a really high price, but they're not in it for price. What are they in it for? Profit. Yeah, they're in it for profit. They're in it to maximize their profit. So they're going to produce at the profit maximizing point. Yes, the price is higher than a regular firm, but they're still looking at it for profits. And they're looking for total profits, okay, not per unit profits. Just one of those strange little things. If you look at their graph, you might actually be able to find a point where they can make a larger per unit profit, but because of the number of, like, for example, if we produce way back here somewhere, way back here somewhere, they may be, this one probably doesn't show it, but they may be earning a more per unit profit, but because they've restricted output so much, since quantity would be so low, they're not making the largest total profit. So if you started playing with the numbers, you might look at that and see that somewhere, but you're probably not going to notice it on a graph. All right, what questions on that? All right, moving on. All right, so what I want to do is, monopolies can suffer losses. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to draw a monopoly earning a loss. This one's a little bit harder to draw. It takes a little bit more practice. So what I'm going to do here, when you draw this, go ahead and draw a really fat average total cost curve. Okay, you want it really to make it a wide average total cost curve. And we know that if they're going to earn a loss, this is not a shutdown, so what else do we need in this graph? We need average variable cost curve. Yeah, so go ahead and draw your average variable cost curve. It's got to be down and to the left. The minimum's got to be down to the left, and put a big space between the two. It just makes your life easier. Okay, and then we need a marginal cost curve that intersects the minimums of these two. So it looks like there and about there is about the minimums of those. Again, if this was the AP exam, you'd want to be a lot more careful about it and, you know, take your time drawing it for them. Now, in order to earn a loss, price has to be where? Below the ATC, correct. But it has to be above the ABC. So what we're going to do is we're going to come in and we're going to draw this demand curve, and we're going to draw him like, it doesn't matter where it intersects, but you just got to draw a demand curve here. Just make sure that the majority of it is below the minimum of the ATC. And then, of course, we're going to draw a marginal revenue curve here. And in order to maximize profit or minimize loss, oh, we did work. There we go. My clicker's working again. In order to maximize profit or minimize loss, where does this firm produce? Come on, everybody should shout that out. Where MR equals MC. So you find where MR equals MC right there. And that tells us our what? Our quantity. All that tells us is our quantity. So we drop straight down here. That gives us our quantity. And from that, now we know our quantity. What do we then find from there? Our price. To get our price, we go up to the demand curve, because D equals P equals AR, right? Go up to our demand curve, and that tells us our price. Then we say, is this firm earning a profit or a loss? How do we know if they're earning a profit or loss? Exactly. Where is price relative to the ATC? That will always tell you profit or loss. In this case, price is below ATC, so they're earning a loss. Yeah. And to show that loss, just go straight up from that price, demand curve to the ATC, run across, and that is the total loss, total economic loss. And again, this question would say shade in the loss, so you'd shade it in. If they didn't, then of course you could come over to the side and you could do this and say econ loss if you want. Okay, so that is a firm earning an economic loss. Good question. Do you have to write ATC on the y-axis? Probably best to do it, not a killer if you don't. All right, so the question is, what's going to happen in the long run? Yes, in the long run, they're going to keep earning a loss. I said I could hear you just well with this thing on, but you all are a little bit muffled. Yeah, in the long run, they're going to continue to earn an economic loss, because what's missing for monopoly? Free entry and exit. Yeah, there's no free entry and exit. This firm is the only one producing this product. Now, assuming this is a product that society needs, they're the only ones producing it. So what's going to happen is they're going to continue to earn a loss. The United States Postal Service, for a while, was earning an economic loss. They had to go in and make some adjustments to that because they were earning a loss, and we kind of need the post office. People depend on it, and so so in the long run, there's not free entry. That's why for that perfect competitive stuff, saying those words due to free entry and exit is important. All right, what questions do you have on this? Okay. Next on the list of things we need to learn here is, up to this point, we've just drawn a monopoly. If this were what we call a natural monopoly, I mentioned this yesterday, a natural monopoly is one where a monopoly where only one can exist. Only one firm can exist because their costs are so high. So if I were to take this monopoly, right, let me find a nice cleaner one. How about this one here? Okay, if I were to take this monopoly right here, and I'm going to erase all this stuff here off the side now. If I were to take this monopoly and I were to suddenly shift the ATC up, okay, so this is the current ATC, okay, and if I were to shift it up to, like, let's say, that's going to make it earn a loss. If I were to shift it up where, let's see, there we go, like that. Okay, so now there's the new ATC. Okay, what this is this is a firm that the costs are very, very high versus the one in black. This one here, the costs were lower. So when the curve shifted up, did the demand curve move? No, the demand for this product is still the same, but what's happening now is that you have a higher average total cost curve. That's what a natural monopoly is. A natural monopoly is one that has a very high average total cost curve. So if we were to draw it, the key when you draw a natural monopoly is, all right, so we're going to label it as price, revenue, cost, quantity. You're going to go ahead and draw your ATC. Again, draw a fairly fat ATC. It just makes life easier for you if you draw a fatter ATC. And you know, you do need to be practicing drawing these for the quizzes that are going to be coming up, the graphing quizzes that will be coming up. You know, draw correctly labeled monopoly, earning an economic profit, or draw correctly labeled natural monopoly, earning an economic profit. Right? Fair quiz questions coming up next week. Marginal cost intersects the minimum. And when you draw a natural monopoly, the only thing that's different between it and a regular monopoly is the demand curve for a natural monopoly intersects to the left of the minimum of the ATC. So when you draw your demand curve in, just make sure it intersects to the left of the minimum of the ATC. Okay, so everybody stop for a second, look at this one here. This is a natural monopoly. It intersects to the left. I haven't drawn the MR yet. Versus, well, what in the world? Oh, okay, yeah, because I drew that in there. Okay, versus this one here, which is a regular monopoly. See, the demand curve intersected to the right of the minimum of the ATC. There's the minimum, it intersects to the right. If the ATC were to shift up here because of high cost, now we could argue this is a natural monopoly because the demand curve is to the left of the minimum of the ATC. Just high cost, that's all it is. So when we come back to this guy here, I'm still missing one thing. What am I missing? A marginal revenue curve. Draw an MR that falls at a faster rate. Why does the MR fall at a faster rate? Because they have to lower the price on that unit, all previous units, in order to sell another unit. That's your answer. The MR falls at a faster rate because in order to sell another unit, they have to lower the price on that unit, all previous units. Now this firm is going to produce where MR equals MC. That tells us our what? Where MR equals MC, that tells us our quantity. Now we've got our quantity. Oh, whatever should we price this product for? What do we price it for? How much do we charge? Go up to the demand curve, because the demand curve is how much they are willing and able to pay. So let's charge them every bit that they're willing and able to pay, because that's where price comes from. So we're going to go up to the demand curve, come across. Is this firm earning a profit or a loss? How do we know? Yep, they're earning a profit because price is above the ATC. And then we can shade in our profit. This is a natural monopoly earning an economic profit. Yes, sir. This one. I was about to say, I often get asked about this one right here. Is this a natural monopoly or a regular monopoly? And the answer is we really don't know. Okay, you would say, oh, it's got to be a natural monopoly because the demand curve is to the left of the minimum of the ATC. Well, how do we know that this isn't just a firm, isn't this firm here, hang on, isn't this firm here where the demand curve just happened to shift to the left? If the demand for the product decreases, then that's not necessarily a natural monopoly. By definition, a natural monopoly is one where the costs are so high that only one can exist. This could be a regular monopoly that just has low demand. Not high costs, just low demand, right? So when it comes back down to this, we don't know if this is a regular monopolist or a natural monopolist. Okay, this is just a monopolist earning an economic loss. If they try to trick you and say draw a natural monopolist earning an economic loss, well, it would look just like this one, okay? Or if they say draw a monopolist earning an economic loss, well, it would look just like this. So in both cases, it's going to look like this, whether it's natural or regular. Okay. The idea of natural monopolist is that if you're going to draw one earning a profit, then the demand curve has to intersect to the left of the minimum of the ATC, and they're earning a profit. Yes, sir. Okay, so you actually, what you ended up doing is when you drew it, your MR equals MC is too far to the left. I know, I'm sorry, too far to the right. If yours is showing an economic loss, then your MR equals MC intersection is too far to the right, and that's one of these things you'll just kind of have to practice drawing it. Yeah, you need to have a steeper MR. You should have a steeper MR. If I drew my MR looking like this, which is right, now this firm is earning an economic loss, right? And so that's just something that you'll have to practice drawing when you do it. Yeah, it happens. Anybody else? All right, let's take a look at, and this is not in your notes, but let's just take a look at this right here. Someone tell me, first of all, is this a regular monopolist or a natural monopolist? It's a regular monopolist, okay? And we know it's a regular monopolist because the demand curve intersects to the right of the minimum of the ATC. Is this firm earning an economic profit or an economic loss? It's earning an economic profit because price is above ATC, okay? Now, if this were a perfect competitive industry, where would this industry produce at? This is not in your notes. This is something that we needed to get. I need to add this slide into your notes, but I did not. If this were a perfect competitive industry, where would this firm, not this firm, where would this industry produce at? Say again? Okay, no, because if you remember, when we draw a industry, let me go ahead and go back here. So if we were going to draw just a regular old industry, right? Where does it produce? Where supply and demand intersect, right? That's that's where they produce. That's the industry. So if we go back to this guy here, where's our supply curve? Hey, it is the marginal cost curve. It's the adding together of all the individual marginal cost curves. And I know I said monopolists don't have a supply curve. That's why I didn't label it supply before. For a monopolist, it's not supply. But if this were a perfect competitor, that would be supply. So the perfect competitor would actually produce this quantity way out here. And that's a fluke, by the way, that it intersects where it hits MR. I'm going to do this so it doesn't. Okay, that's the quantity it would produce. And this is the price it would produce. I'm going to do QPC. Where a monopolist is producing this quantity, QM, and it's charging this price, QM. Thanks. Go ahead. Let me finish this. Let me finish this concept first before I go back to another graph. Okay. All right. So take a look at this. Tell me about the monopolist output compared to the perfect competitor. It's going to be, read the graph, guys. The monopolist output compared to the perfect competitor. It's going to be less. Monopolists are going to produce less of the product. What price are the monopolists going to charge? Monopolists are going to charge a higher price. This is one of the reasons why we say monopolists are evil, okay? Or why I call them evil. Well, monopolists are not what society would like to have because they charge a restrict output, charge a lower quantity, and they charge a higher price. They restrict output and charge a higher price. Okay, that's one of the bad things compared to a perfect competitor. That's what makes monopolists not desirable in our society. Yes, sir. We're gonna do consumer surplus on Monday. Consumer producer surplus and dead weight on Monday. Yes, that's exactly true. Okay, now what was your question? I don't know on page 26. No, it's a natural monopoly earning an economic profit. Yes, that would have been a natural monopoly earning an economic profit. That one right there. It's the second graph on page 26, a natural monopoly earning an economic profit. Okay. So since these monopolies are what I say evil, we would like to have the government come in and regulate these guys. All right, we want them to be efficient because, as you know, economics is the efficient use of scarce resources. The efficient use of scarce resources. So we want to try to achieve efficiency. Well, there's two different types of efficiency. The first is allocative efficiency. Okay, where is allocative efficiency? Okay, it's where they're utilizing the resources to produce what society wants. It's not that they're necessarily using all the resources, it's they're utilizing the resources to produce what society wants. And how do we find that? What point is that? Price equals marginal cost. Guys, you need to know that. Okay, they're gonna test efficiency all over the test. Okay, that's the definition of allocated efficiency. Producing what society wants is the definition. It is where price equals marginal cost. The other type of efficiency is productive efficiency. What is productive efficiency? Say again? No, not using all the resources. What is productive efficiency? You got close. Producing in the least costly way. Please make sure you go back and study these allocated and productive efficiency. Productive efficiency is producing in the least costly way. Where on a graph would we find productive efficiency? Price equals minimum of the ATC. Okay, now, if we know that, let's take a look at a graph. Let's take a look at this monopolist here. Is this monopolist allocated efficient? Is it producing where price equals marginal cost? And the answer is no. Okay, the allocated efficient point would be way out there. It's not producing where price equals marginal cost. Okay, will a monopolist ever be allocated efficient? Never. Because of the slope of the marginal cost curve and the slope of the marginal revenue curve, a monopolist will never, ever, ever be allocative efficient, ever. Short run or long run. Is this monopolist productive efficient? Is it producing is price equal minimum ATC? No, price is not equal minimum ATC. Now, some people don't believe this, but you just got to trust me on this. You can try to draw it as many times as you want, but it ain't going to happen. This firm will never, ever be productive efficient. Okay, people say, well, what if the demand curve just happened to go through the minimum of the ATC? Okay, great. They're still going to produce where MR equals MC, so they're going to charge a higher price. They may be the productive efficient quantity, but they're not productive efficient because they're not producing at that point. Well, even then, nope, that wouldn't work because even then they're producing a lower quantity. Okay, or people will say, what if the MR just happens to go through? And again, this would be a total fluke that would just happen to happen. Okay, there's when MR is going through there. Yes, that's the quantity they're producing, but is that where price equals minimum ATC? No, it's not, because the price is way up here. So the monopolist will never be productive efficient. So since they'll never be productive efficient and they'll never be allocated efficient, that means think back to the first day in this class. Economics is about the efficient use of scarce resources. So monopolies are inefficient by their very nature. They restrict output, they charge a higher price, they're not allocated efficient, they're not productive efficient. And because of that, governments regulate them. If a monopoly is allowed to exist, the government's going to come in and say, you can exist, but you have to do this. You have to produce at this price. And they regulate them by putting in a price. Monopolies are regulated by putting in a price. There's two possible ways that we can regulate them. The first way is what we call the socially optimal. Okay, the socially optimal. Socially optimal, as far as we know, It's the same thing as, well, look, it's social optimal is price equals marginal cost. That's the same thing as what? Price equals marginal cost is allocated efficient. Yeah. So this for us is easy because it's the same thing as allocated efficient. Now, we don't say we're going to regulate the monopoly at the allocated efficient point. We say we're going to regulate them at the socially optimal point. I don't know why. I just know that's what we do. So understand that we're going to regulate them at the allocated efficiency point, which is what we call socially optimal. So this is socially optimal. Now, if we regulate them there, what's going to happen is that's going to mean they're going to produce this quantity way out here. They're going to produce a greater quantity, and the price is going to decrease. Society is better off because we're getting more of the product at a lower price, and they're using the resources to produce what society wants. They're not restricting output and wasting our resources, right? Except for the fact that, wait, most monopolies are not regular monopolies. Most monopolies out there are what type? They're natural monopolies. That's why they are allowed to continue to exist, is because two couldn't exist. Most monopolies are natural monopolies. So if we go back to a natural monopoly that we drew earlier, not that one, this guy here, and we decided to regulate him at the allocated efficient point where price equals marginal cost right here. Oh, sorry. At the socially optimal. What's going on? Yeah, he's earning an economic loss. So if we choose to regulate a natural monopoly at the socially optimal point, they're going to be earning economic losses. Can we do that? The only way we could do it is if we did it and we subsidize them. In other words, we say, we're going to regulate you here, you can't charge this, but then behind the scenes, we take tax dollars and we give them money to keep them in business. Correct. It's coming out of the tax. Well, actually, it would. If you are a consumer, you get to pay a lower price. But then the taxpayers are going to foot some of the bill for you consuming that product. Yeah. No, that actually, yes. Well, because they're paying for something. They hurt more because they're paying for something they're not getting. Yeah. Okay. So yeah. Right. To pay for the subsidy. Well, again, then the people who use more electricity are getting a better deal than people who use less electricity. Okay. You could almost argue that the rich who are going to be using more electricity get a better deal out of this. And then people say, well, but the rich pay more taxes. Well, okay, yeah. Now what are we going to do? So I mean, I don't have an answer for you. It's just it makes it more fuzzy. When you subsidize, it doesn't make it more funny, but you are fuzzy. But you are definitely right. All right. So maybe allocative efficiency might not be the best thing to do. So another possibility is we can regulate them for what they get, a fair return. Okay, what we call a fair return. A fair return is where price equals ATC, not price equals minimum of ATC. This is price equals ATC. We can't regulate them at the minimum of the ATC. Why not? Yeah, it's impossible. The demand curve never hits the minimum of the ATC. You can't regulate them off their demand curve. You got to let them produce on their demand curve here. So instead, we produce where price equals ATC, which is going to be right there. That's what we call a fair return. What's fair about that? Yeah, they're making zero economic profit. They're making as much here as they would in their next best alternative. That's fair, right? Do we need to subsidize them? No, we would not need to subsidize them. Are they increasing output when we regulate them there? Yes, they're producing a greater quantity and they're charging a lower price. So society can be happy about this. They're earning zero economic profit, right? What if we went and we said, okay, wait a minute. This is a natural monopoly. Could we regulate them at a fair return? Fair return would be price equals ATC, which would be right there. What are they earning there? Zero economic profit. That's what makes it zero economic profit. And of course, then it'd be a lower price than if it weren't regulated, and it'd be a greater quantity if it weren't regulated. Yes, pretty much every monopoly out there is regulated. The post office. Recently, the post office, about 4 years ago, I don't know, I mean, my dates, maybe 5 years ago, 3 years or whatever, they were earning an economic loss. The post office was losing money. Nobody was mailing stamps. The demand curve had decreased. Their costs were very, very high. They were a natural monopoly. And the post office wanted to raise prices on their stamps. Well, the post office can't just raise prices because they are regulated. So they have to get permission from the government. And what happened was the government came in and said, okay, yeah, you can raise your prices, but only for X amount of time. And then you got to put your prices back down again. And in that X amount of time, you better figure out a way to lower your costs. So they were allowed to raise their prices basically for a short period, it was like 3 or 4 years. And I think it was last February, the prices dropped down again. So now we're paying a lower price on stamps than we were a year ago. So yeah, pretty much all electric companies, those guys are all regulated as far as what price they can charge. All right. What questions do you have? Okay, that is it. I'm going to stop there. I will do consumer and producer surplus on Monday. That gives you a chance to kind of digest this before I go into that.